So let's go ahead and begin. Let me share my screen so you can see what I see. And yeah, so this webinar's focus is supposed to be on how you can use user engagement and just sort of using reports within our analytics to sort of grow your site. So to sort of set the stage, I wanted to show you some research that we have on the topic. And to begin, we did this research back in 2017, and this shows a clear correlation of, some basic UX metrics, whether that be time on site, bounce rate, engagement. So from this first picture, we can see that time on site and earnings are kind of correlated. So more people, when your users are on your site, the longer they're on the site, the higher earnings are going to be. And that is true not just for time on site. We also see that for page views per visit on both mobile and desktop. So, so we know the longer someone's on the page, the more earnings they're going to have. And we also know the more page views per visit, the more earnings they're going to have. And this can make sense, if the user is on the page for a longer period of time, more impressions can show, they have higher engagement, so that impression has higher value. So that's just sort of, setting the stage why this is important and how it can really be leveraged to grow your site and also, maybe avoid problems that could potentially pop up in the future. So we're going to go ahead and hop into our analytics here. And we're just going to start with a general overview of, explaining what each metric means and how we can sort of understand it from not just from like the publisher standpoint, but from the user standpoint. So this is the default user experience report, and we can change the time frame. We can add segments. We can pick what metric we want to see on this graph, etc. And by default, the metrics, visits, pretty standard. Page views per visit, just taking page views divided by visits. And then when we start getting to, stuff that says engage page view, okay, what does that mean? So here at Ezoic, when we say an engage page view, what we mean is, the user's been, interacting with the site for like 10 seconds on a minimum. So that whether that be, clicking on the text of an article, scrolling through an article, moving their mouse around, whatever that engagement might be, that is how we decide what an engage page view is. And the way we set it up was, with the minimum 10 seconds is we want to sort of exclude, people that are quickly looking at the page and just bouncing right away. So this is a key metric because it tells us, pretty much, how good the content is in a sense, and how long users are staying engaged with that content. So then what we do is, next one is we take, average engage time, how long they're engaged, per visit. And then of course, bounce rate is a very common one, percentage, when they hop on the site and leave right away, they get bounced. And then a more, technical one, which is visit navigations. So a navigation bounces, let's say you're on a website, right? And you click on, another article within that website, and then you immediately click the back button, but you stay on that website. That is what navigation bounces. And, if users are doing lots of navigation bounces, maybe they're causing accidental clicks. Maybe there's a pop-up or some other thing that would cause that interaction to happen. Generally speaking, this metric will be on a very low percentage for sites. And then the last metric, which is return visitor rate. So this just tells you what percentage of users have been to your site once before and they come back again. Pretty straightforward. So that is pretty much a general overview of user experience, of the metrics at least. And now we're going to show you sort of the different reports breakdown, and then after that I'll go in and show why it's important, how we can segment it and see insightful things. So the first report is just an overview, of course. And then we have a second one, which does a breakdown by device. So whether that be mobile, tablet, or desktop. So in this example, this website has, almost 60% mobile traffic and about 35% desktop. So then we can see is the breakdown per metric. So if we look over here, we can see generally a higher bounce rate for mobile compared to desktop. And that kind of makes sense based off of how your mobile device, it's a lot smaller compared to a desktop, or maybe, there's some other, you know, things about the site. Maybe their mobile setup could be optimized further, or, the mobile speed is a little slower, whatever that may be. But generally speaking, mobile metrics have less engagement because it's sort of a little bit less engaging just based off of the whole dynamic between the small smartphone and the big computer desktop screen. And then tablets usually somewhere in the middle, but these can vary a lot depending on the site, of course. And then the next report is going to be for, whoops, I had it pulled up here. So this one is going to be for page level. So one of the most useful things to look at is sort of seeing these user experience metrics per page, so per article. So for this site, I took the top URLs or the top pages and sorted it by page views. Now, what we'll notice is, if we look over at these metrics, the first thing that pops my eyes is this article here has a really low engagement time. Now, this just says website, of course, but I have some extra knowledge to know what the website is. This website I know has really long articles, and if someone has low engagement on an article for a website that has really long articles, that would be like a red flag I would want to point out. So this, maybe what we could do is now look at this article and ask a question: why are users less engaged with this one compared to other articles? It could be a homepage, it could be, a shorter article, etc. So looking at this on a page level really helps, get more insights and be more granular about how you can do your analysis. And then also we develop this page engagement rate, which just takes, that engaged page views, as I said before, if someone's engaged for at least minimum of 10 seconds, and then looks at it for each page view. So the higher this percentage is, the better. The lower, the worse. And then the next report is going to be, go back to this one, is going to be by traffic source. So, we all understand where traffic comes from for sites, but how do you know how good that traffic is? You'll probably hear some things about, hey, it's US, Google, organic traffic, really good quality. Well, how do we actually know that? And the first thing we can look at is how are users engaged? So if we look at this example here, of course, the top driver is Google. They are about, majority traffic, 75% in this case. So this is an organic site, drives their traffic through Google. And then if it says unknown ever, this just means we're unable to track it. And it could be an indicator of bad traffic. And, that could make sense. We have a higher bounce rate for this unknown source than we do for any other source besides, a direct traffic. So we can sort of use this to sort of analyze what type of traffic is coming to the site. And let's say, if we notice anything we don't like, we can look into it, maybe block it, or, find some, something to get around it. Or maybe, the traffic is really good and it's improving over time. That means, if our Google traffic has great user experience metrics, that could be seen as, a positive flag for advertisers. And great user experience, that means great engagement. So that generally means higher CPMs on bids, and then you're going to see higher EPMV or total earnings go up. And then the next report within here is content viewed percentage. So this tells you what percentage of your content is viewed for that visit. For that visit. So how it's originally sorted is by page views, but I like to sort it by percent view. So this tells you, hey, and it puts them in buckets. So people that view 100% of the content to 90% is here, and then 50% of that content to there. So what we'll see just off of first glance from this report is for the smaller percent values, it's going to be less engagement. That makes sense, right? If you're only viewing, 10% of a page and then, you leave, you're not considered anything else, so you're gonna have low engagement. So, this makes sense that we'll see, worse engagement with these smaller percentages, and then we'll see engagement improve over time with the longer they're on the site. And same with page duration, because pretty straight, and of course bounce rate would decrease over time too. So pretty much this just means, hey, users are, once they stay on the page, they're going to be engaged to it, and the longer they're engaged on it, the better it's going to show for UX metrics. And sometimes, for some sites, this is different. Maybe, you have a site that drives a lot of traffic to like a viral article, for example. You might have some users, viewing like, 50% of the content or like within, the 50, 90%, and none will go 100%. And then that'll sort of skew everything. So it's kind of insightful to be able to see what percentage of your content is actually being viewed by your visitors on average. And then the last report within this, within user experience is social shares. This doesn't really get used that much because it has to do when someone goes on a website and clicks on the social icon and click shares. And what you'll see is, which is kind of interesting because, every site has it. You'll see for this one, for example, this site gets about 60K page views per month, and they haven't had not a single person did a social share within the 30-day period we looked at. So it just tells you how many people actually click those share buttons on social media or for the social media icons. If we see here, it'll say no data because no one has actually shared on it. So that's really interesting. Some sites do drive some traffic through Facebook and sharing articles on Pinterest, or vice versa. They'll post on Pinterest and Pinterest will drive the traffic to their site, or they'll post articles on Facebook and Facebook will drive the articles to their site. But it's never really the other way around, where people are using their site to drive traffic to their social media platforms. Social media platforms are usually the first thing, and then the site second. So now that we sort of have just a general overview, I want to show you some useful things on how we can start breaking this up and look a little deeper into a site with user experience. So the first thing I wanted to show you is, okay, so we have this default report, right? There's a lot of numbers here. Some of it might not make sense, and that's okay. But what's really interesting is, remember, if we look, we have this return visitor rate, okay? So you see 23% of users have visited the site and came back. So what if we broke up this whole report and say, hey, let's look at all return visitors and all new visitors and see if there's a difference in user experience. So we're going to go ahead and add those segments here. So we're going to do new user, and then we're going to go return user, and then we're going to kill this all user. I'm going to run this. Okay, so what I did was I just break it up between how many times a new user comes to the site and how many times, we have a returning user. And what we see is, for the new users, they actually have better engagement than a returning visitor for this site particularly. Now, that's kind of, not expected. You would expect, if someone's a returning user, they're a strong user and they've been with the site for a while. So you would think, they would be more engaged. But also on the flip side, if someone is more familiar with your site, then, they might have a faster time navigating it. They might know how to find their information faster, or perhaps this could be an issue. So if the new users are highly engaged, but then when they come back for at least a second time, they're less engaged, perhaps we see a decrease in traffic over time. So what this could do is it can flag, maybe the site setup can be improved upon a little bit in the future. Or, maybe, when you're trying to combine user experience and ad revenue, I want to get into that, maybe there's too many ads or too little, right? So this is going to be, sort of a crucial way to look at, your traffic and say, hey, how do I want to monetize my site? How is too many ads a bad thing? How do I balance that, right? We kind of get to this point where we're unsure now. Now, what I'm going to show you is it's going to be even a little more interesting. Is I'm going to break up these reports. I'm going to show you how many ads are showing per page and the user experience associated with how many ads are being shown to users. And we're going to see some interesting things here. So I'm gonna go ahead and add these guys. So I predefined these segments earlier. So this is going to tell you how many times we see, 20 ads per page, 15 ads per page, 10 ads per page, and 5 ads per page. And then what we're going to do is we're going to break it up into these buckets now. So what we see is, when five ads per page, we see less engagement time than 10 ads per page, right? And we see, why would engagement increase with more ads being shown? So there's actually two things going on here. The first thing is, I know this site has really long articles. So long articles, if you scroll down it, forever, and an ad shows every, page length view, then the longer you're on the page, the more ads are going to show. But in this case, why aren't users leaving the page if, more ads are being shown to them, etc.? So what we find is, there's, and that kind of breaks up into two things. One, users might not be that, sensitive to ads on pages necessarily as we think before. And the second thing is, of course, with how, Ezoic works with optimizing, user experience and revenue over time, the longer the user is on the site, we know how to make that one visit more valuable, that one session more valuable. So when they go through the session, we know how to serve them impressions without it, harming their UX and actually leaving, right? So if this one user, let's say they're going to normally spend, 1 minute of engaged time on the site, if we figure out how to extend that and still show them, the same amount of, ad impressions, maybe we could do that for 1 minute and, 42 seconds and show, some extra impressions. What happens is our ad viewability goes up, advertisers see that, and then they're going to bid higher. So this is sort of, showing direct correlation between how we can have good user experience and revenue. Yes, we can think, more ads are bad, but also at the same time, we can see how can we leverage, some common things with, knowing that good user experience is really good. Because at the end of the day, as long as users are interacting with your content and your content is good, then, everything else is sort of on the side. It's like that cliche saying, content is king. And when content is king, you're going to leverage that and write your best content. So when you improve your content over time and, using reports like this, then you realize, regardless of how you monetize a site, the goal is just always have them to be engaged for a longer period of time and have page views per visit go up over time. And that's sort of like the crux of user experiences. The longer they're on the page, the better. The more page views they visit, the better. And everything else sort of, is in addition to that. Yes, you can harm your user experience by, ad jamming a site and just, putting native ads everywhere, very like spam clicky stuff everywhere. And that's going to harm it, and we're going to see it in the metrics. But if we don't see that sort of behavior happening when we're monetizing a site through display ads, then we kind of know it's not actually harming the user experience. And traffic can go down for various reasons, but the first thing to check is like, okay, if the amount of ads I'm showing on the page are harming my user experience, let's see, is bounce rate increasing over time? Are users being less engaged per visit? How many page views are they viewing? Less page views per each visit? And that's sort of the main idea of why these metrics are helpful in sort of understanding, user experience as a whole. But yeah, bottom line is always time on site. The longer that is, the more earnings they're going to have. And then page views per visit, the more of those, more page views per that visit, the higher the earnings are going to be. And that's a direct correlation we actually found when we did research on this, I believe in 2017. So that's sort of, how we can use this. And then, each site is going to be different. Some sites might show, completely different UX metrics compared to this one. I know this site has really long article length, so I'm expecting the engagement time to be longer, and I'm expecting the bounce rate to be a little lower. But overall, if you're looking for ways to grow your site, the first thing you want to look at is user experience. Yes, revenue comes on after that, and monetizing the site. But usually the number one thing you're going to realize is the better the user experience, the longer your users stay engaged with their content, and you have some good strategies for traffic growth for SEO, then monetization is going to follow that. And then that's sort of why using a multivariate testing with different ad locations is really helpful, because we sort of want to curate to the user experience of every user, not just some group A and some group B. We want to have sort of every type of user have curated ad setup. So yeah, that was just sort of the overview of user experience and using this to leverage it for your site. I just want to open up and see if you guys have any questions, and we can sort of go from there. Yeah, so yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and then we can go from there. Yeah, so Helen has a question. What kind of bounce rate is average among all websites, and why is bounce rate different between Ezoic and Google Analytics? So yeah, this is a great question. So bounce rate on average is kind of dependent on, of course, the site, but if you want to say average for all sites, it's not really going to be too insightful. I would say from every site I've looked at and every average I've seen, we probably will see it around like the 40%, 50, like 30% range, maybe 20 to 40%. But the key thing is, it depends on the type of content you have. For example, let's say you have a website, and the website's whole point of their website is you click on a wheel to give you a yes or no answer. It's like a random decision maker, right? A user is going to be, they're going to click on the wheel, it's going to spin, whatever, it's going to say, hey, yes or no, right? It's going to like a super easy site like that. That site's going to have a really high bounce rate. And it might not be indicative of bad user experience, but rather indicative of the type of website it is. But if you're an article type website, then bounce rate plays a bigger role. How long are your articles? Is your there's some sites where articles are like 2 paragraphs, and it's just sort of filled with sort of a heavy ad layout. So in that case, you're going to have a high bounce rate. So on average, I would say that would be the answer. And the difference between Ezoic and Google Analytics sort of comes into a lot of it is technical. But I would say the biggest difference is how we do our integration. With DNS, we have a lot more accuracy. We can sort of get more granular with UX. We can really see how and when users are going on the site and leaving, and we can see that in fine detail and fine accuracy with precision. So, and then Google Analytics runs into issues with their definition of a bounce rate as well. So we define bounce rate, if a user has been on a site for some amount of time and leave right away, that's a bounce. But that some amount of time, whether that be 5 seconds, 3 seconds, depends on how you define it. So that's where you see the main difference in Google Analytics between Ezoic. Yeah, and then there's a couple more questions in the chat. How do you drive views for returning users or impact of returning users? So yeah, that's a great question. So returning users are a user that goes to the site twice after been to it once, right? Now, for example, when you type a question in Google, usually when you type a question, you answer something, and the first thing that pops up hopefully answers your question fully, right? So you click on the link, you go to the website, get your question answered, you leave, and you probably never come back, right? And then let's say there's a case where you do that, you answer the question, you're like, but the question is related to maybe a subject you're interested in, or some sort of topic that you want to find out more about. So what happens is when you type in your question in Google and you go to a site, and then you get engaged with it, you actually you really find this like insightful, you're kind of going to remember it maybe for next time. So you might bookmark the site, you know, if it's, you know, really good content and it's like really insightful to like something you're interested in, you might bookmark it, you know, you might leave it open. You might remember the URL, then type it in later. So you might type in the URL and then type in the question related to that again. So for example, let's say you have a site about gardening, right? And I'm a gardening fanatic. You know, I spend, you know, a whole Saturday gardening, right? Now, let's say I type a question about gardening and I've been, you know, during quarantine, I'm trying to really improve my garden, right? So I type a question in Google and a site pops up, right? And then it answers my question fully and I'm really happy about it. Now, let's say, you know, I like it so much that I'm like, hey, I'm going to use this for other things. So when I start doing it, start exploring the site and seeing if I can answer my other questions, or maybe give me inspiration of how I can make my garden better. And that's sort of the best way to drive, you know, returning users. It depends, you know, how much value they get out of what they find. You know, a lot of traffic is just driven by Google in the sense that you're just going to type in a query in Google search, and then if your query gets answered, you're golden. But then it's like, how can you go a step further? You type in your query in Google, you know, and it's a maybe, you know, this happens to be on a subject you like, and you find it super insightful and like really, you know, useful and get a lot of value on it, then you're more likely to return to that site. And so that's how I say you can grow views for returning visitors, is make it be so insightful for the user that, you know, they don't need to look anywhere else, right? They kind of find an end all for their questions on the topic. All right, well, if there's no more questions, then I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for taking the time out of your day and showing up. Yeah, have a great day, everyone.